Yani, it's me again. So now with the Nigerian Christian perspective. And today we have been looking at the Trinity. We've discussed the biblical foundations of the Trinity. So today we are going to look at belief in God. Does it make sense or not? And here's the issue. A lot of Nigerian Christian youths, they are going to universities, going to schools, and like before Mercy Ambaudiwe will say, in Africa, only the fool says in his heart that there is no God. But now we see it becoming more of a trend. The atheist community is growing stronger in Africa, in Nigeria in particular. Christian students go to university and then they end up not believing in God. So it is becoming a problem. So the question is, why would we believe in God? Why should we believe in God? Does God even exist? Is there proof that God exists? Can we use science to prove that God exists? Now, to get it out of the way, first of all, we cannot use science to prove that God exists. There is no substantial evidence. But on the other hand, we can also make the argument that we cannot use science to prove that God does not exist. There is no substantial evidence that God does not exist. So some people will claim that it is circular reasoning, but if I claim that my God exists and you say I am wrong, then the burden of proof is on you to prove me wrong, that I am wrong to believe that my God exists. So with that being said, first of all, let's look at the scientific theories of creation and see how they weigh compared to the theist belief that God exists. According to science, the universe was created by the Big Bang. Matter and antimatter collided. And when they collided, they created what we now know as the universe. But while we have evidence of matter in everything around us, we actually do not have evidence of antimatter. So antimatter is just a theory that they came up to explain another theory called the Big Bang theory. Now, when we go further, we also look at how organisms were created. We said complex organisms were created from a single-celled organism. And so because of that, all organisms have one or more common ancestors. So now just to say, the Darwinian evolution does not teach that human beings have their ancestors as monkeys. No, the Darwinian evolution teaches that humans and monkeys share a common ancestor. So that is what evolution theory suggests. Now the thing is, there has been no substantial evidence for Darwinian evolution, and it is not something that we have observed over the course of the billions of years that they claim that the Earth has existed for. So we do not have proof. It is just theory. This might have been what happened. And Darwin, he reached this theory from his discovery of evolution among the same species. He never discovered the evolution from one species, one organism to another organism. He just saw, okay, there were variations in species based on their environment. And so he came up with his theory in his book, The Origin of Species, which Darwinian evolutionists have hampered on to argue for Darwinian evolution. So now, how does that stack up against creation? Against creation, we believe that there is a being who created the universe. Now, creationists usually use this argument for intelligent design, which makes sense to me. Imagine you go to the sea, you go to the shores of the sea, and when you get to the shores of the sea, you see your name written boldly on the shores of the sea with marble, spelled exactly and accurately. Which one would be easier for you to believe? Would it be easier to believe that somehow, some way, the ocean waves and the wind just blew the marble there and it spelled your name? Or would you believe that someone had come there and purposefully dropped these stones to spell your name? Now that is where the argument of intelligent design comes in the teleological argument. We believe that the world did not just come around by a series of accidental um, occurrences. We believe that the world came around because there was a creator. So instead of nothing resulting to the Big Bang, we say a necessary being, which we call God. He was the one that created the world. And that is what we believe. And I think when we check the evidence, it makes sense. Even atheist scientists have acknowledged that the way that the universe exists, it suggests that there must have been a Big Bang. Like when you check the universal constant, the way that they are accurate to the 8 to the 10th factorial, that if just this were missed, that everything would have fallen out of place. You'll find out that it makes sense. And then a second argument that a lot of atheists use, a lot of modern atheists use, is what is called the problem of evil. If God, why evil? But we would argue that this problem actually starts on the premise of there being God. Because without God, we can actually not know what evil is. And a lot of scientists have tried to prove to us using science that we can use science to come up with morality. Atheists like Sam Harris have tried to argue for this, but we see that all of their arguments stand up and fall because they argue from a point or position of materialism. And from the materialistic perspective, everything we do, we are controlled by electric signals, by neurons, by sparks in our head, by fluids, so to say. So it means that if today I stand up and stab someone with a knife, I am doing it based on these electric signals, based on these hormones in my brain, these fluids in my brain that are going out and going up and down, these chemicals in my brain. So you cannot hold me responsible for what I do because actually I am not the one doing it. That is the materialistic perspective. It is deterministic in nature because it is these electric signals, these hormones, these fluids that are controlling us. But when we come to the creationist perspective, we live our morality based on the objective moral lawgiver, which we call God. So it is what God has placed it in our hearts, this moral nature in our hearts, that okay, this is the way to go, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is evil. It is only from this presupposition that we even have a conception of what good is, of what evil is. Without this God, we cannot say something is good, something is evil, because what you call evil, it is the chemicals in your brain that are telling you that it is evil. The chemicals in my brain may be telling me that it is good. So which chemicals are superior to which chemicals? Is it the chemicals in your brain or the chemicals in my brain? So you see, we have morality becomes subjective. So in the first place, when we bring about the problem of evil as an argument against God, we have to first presuppose an objective moral lawgiver. We have to first presuppose that a God exists for us to argue from the problem of evil. Even now, and also just to add to this discussion on the problem of evil, we look at the problem of evil and we think to ourselves that this thing cannot be happening, this thing should not be happening, based on what morality. So we say, for example, people like Bart Ehrman lost their faith and they claimed it was due to this problem of evil. They just believe that there can't be a God for these things to happen. But we say if there's no God, then you don't even have the prerogative to understand that this thing is right or this thing is wrong, this thing is morally upright or this thing is morally wrong. So we see that the problem of evil itself, it presupposes God. Now, again, like I have said in my previous videos, one of the problems we have about understanding God is we try to give him a human conception, because Anthropomorphic terms are used to describe God. We assume God is a human being. It looks like a human being. So he has two arms, two legs, a head, and everything. And so we confine him to time and space. But God is beyond time and space. Now, coming from a philosophical perspective, from the philosophy of religion's perspective, we generally classify beings into two. That is the necessary beings and the contingent beings. Now, contingent beings are beings that have a beginning. So by having a beginning, it means that these beings are created. And because these beings are created, they cannot exist on their own, and so they need necessary beings. Now, necessary beings are the opposite of contingent beings. Necessary beings are beings that are not created, they exist by themselves. So they are self-sustainant. So when we say, okay, if God created the universe, then who created God? It begs the question. It shows a lack of understanding of what we mean by God. We mean He's someone that is all powerful, all omniscient, and He's everywhere. He's all present. So we mean that He's everlasting. So He does not have someone that created Him. He just exists. He exists by himself. He does not need anything to sustain him. That is why he's able to create something and sustain that thing. So that is the difference between a necessary being and a contingent being. Secondly, we ask another question that many times when I hear it, I believe it's a dumb question. And the question is, okay, if God created the heavens and the earth, where was God staying before he created the heavens and the earth? First of all, you have to understand heaven in that context. Heaven, does this refer to the place, the eschatological place that Christians hope to go, to the place where um, the Bible believes God stays, or does it refer to the firmament? So if it refers to the firmament, it's talking about creation. Here, it's not talking about the place where God stays. So you have to understand that distinction. That's why he said he created the heavens and the earth, and then he divided the waters from the waters. So it's not talking about the place that God stays. So we see it does not show a contradiction about God. It actually only describes the earth itself. In fact, the earth, just the firmament that God created when he was creating the heavens and the earth. So we have to get that out of the way. But so today we have discussed the argument for the existence of God from intelligent design. That's the teleological perspective. We have also discussed the argument for the existence of God um, using the problem of evil. That is part of the moral perspective. And we can see that there is really no sound scientific backing for the atheist position. So Frank Turek will say he doesn't have enough faith to be an atheist. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. It takes a lot of faith to be an atheist because it takes a lot of faith and nothing but faith to believe in the Big Bang. There is no scientific evidence that the Big Bang existed. It is just a theory. There is no scientific evidence for the theory of Darwinian evolution. It's just a theory. And people, because they do not want to believe in God, because they know that by believing in God, it means that we must subject ourselves to this moral lawgiver. They prefer to believe in fiction, in what will honestly be described as science fiction, to the extent that Einstein, because he was struggling to believe in God, he did an equation and he had to add zero, he had to divide by zero, committing a very primary blunder. We go to this extent. When you read Richard Dawkins' God Delusion, and he was trying to debunk the law of irreducible complexity, we see the blunders he had to go. We see how Dawkins had to take the Bible out of context and try to force an interpretation on it. And we see this with plenty scientists. We see this with Neil deGrasse Tyson in their discussions. And because of that, I would recommend books from John Lennox. I think one of his books, if I'm not mistaken, that is very good is God's Undertaker. Has Science Buried God? We can also check another favorite of mine, Frank Turek's I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, we will see that even from the scientific perspective, it is easy to debunk the belief that God does not exist. And because of that, when someone says that it is only people that are not educated enough that believe in God, then we can laugh at the person because the person is talking from an uneducated place. When we get to education, when we look at history, the fields of history, when we look at the fields of philosophy, the axiom has never been that God does not exist. For example, when we go to Socratic philosophy, when we go to Aristotelian philosophy, we see them try to grapple with understanding who God is. They do not come from the position that, okay, philosophically it is bonkers, it is ridiculous to believe in God. They already had this conception of God, and we see that in the book of Romans when he tells us that God has already revealed himself to us, that we are without excuse. We just want to grapple. We just don't want to believe in God. And so because of that, we abandon the truth of God for a lie and worship created beings and created images instead of the creator who is to be praised forever. And it's harmful to us. And our siblings now, younger people, they go to university and they find some professor who himself is grappling with these issues and thinks he has understood, and then he tells them things. And because we have not raised our children to be sound apologetically, they believe these things and they come and they say, I don't believe in God, because they think that they have gotten some higher knowledge or some higher understanding when they really haven't. So it is left for us to actually really study well, to do our best, to be diligent, to show ourselves approved, so that we are ready to give answers for the hope that we have. Because, like William Lane Craig would say, um, our faith is a reasonable one. Our faith is one that is backed by reason. So may God help us as we go on this journey to be able to convince people, because I think apologetics serves as a good watering ground for evangelism. Yeah, so that is that for today.